I'm calling the meeting to order at 9 a.m. It is May 5th, 2022, Cinco de Mayo. Yay! Let's go ahead and celebrate afterwards.
Who's buying?
Not me. You're on your own. We have a lot of good stuff to do today at today's meeting. We have our speaker, Carol King, who's going to talk to us about Peninsula Tree Stewards. We will have a detailed report on the results of our, what appears to have been fantastically successful planned sale. So I'm not going to steal their thunder. So you got to come back after the presentation for the business meeting to hear about that. So that's it for now. I'll introduce Bill, who will introduce our speaker to you.
Well, good morning.
Good morning, Bill.
It's really a treat for me to introduce Carol King. She is really a delightful person. I've gotten to know her somewhat going through the Tree Steward training program because she is such an integral part of that and of tree stewards in the peninsula. She is a remarkable person. She served our country in the Air Force as a logistical officer. She was a full colonel when she retired after 30 years in the Air Force. And truly is a great person. She came down to Earth, discovered what Earth was all about after that, and became a master gardener, and then became a tree steward, and became a tree steward in a big way, just like she did with the Air Force. So she is the leader of all of us in the peninsula, all of the tree steward groups within the peninsula. And in the last couple of years, she has led a group that has rewritten a tree steward manual for the Commonwealth. And those of you who've looked at it realize that's quite a work. It's really excellent. And those of you taking the course going forward will benefit greatly from her work and her committee's work on that. Our own Patsy McGrady was part of that as well. And other people contributed as well. Carol continues to amaze us with her energy at finding educational opportunities about trees. She's been an inspiration for so many projects. In fact, was really instrumental in our projects here that led to the 2 Arboreta in the Williamsburg area. For so many tree projects that have done so well for the peninsula in general. So with that, I'd like to introduce Carol King as our speaker today.
Hey, Bill, this is Jeff Miner. There's no video. Cannot see anything, Bill.
I think the transition of microphones is now complete. I gather they don't like each other.
Oh, Bill,
No, Bill.
there is no video.
Okay, I'm going to fix that.
We can see it now.
Okay, just a minute.
We can see it.
Okay, you got it?
Right now the slide.
Okay. Okay, just a second here.
Okay, well, to start with, thank you all. I appreciate the invitation. I'm always happy to talk about trees to anybody, anywhere, anytime, any tree. There are trees that, you talk about in a negative way, say, trees of heaven, for example, or mulberries. But still, it's all in the benefit of all good trees and what they do for us. So there we go. This is me. And we can continue on. All right. So overview, the talk today
That's what I was trying to get.
Okay, the next thing is, all right, so anyway, Bill asked if I could talk just a little bit about my own approach to the trees and to why it is so important personally. And then also the Peninsula Tree Stewards as a group as something that has people scratching their heads from time to time because it's not a chartered group at all. It's an ad hoc umbrella. And I'm a coordinator. I appreciate leadership. Leadership is as perceived and as effective rather than designated by anybody in a context like this. So I thought I'd clarify a little bit and help anybody who's thinking about becoming a tree steward as to what else there is beyond just the James City County Williamsburg tree steward and how that fits into the Peninsula tree steward. So, and then the tree steward manual was the topic specifically. So that's the last part. So, all right. So I don't know if anybody recognizes the picture on the left. That is going down the ravine, William and Mary. There's that calcareous ravine. Yes. So, and it leads you down into you don't really know where. It's wonderful, but it's going to be nice. Yeah. And then there's the light breaking through the trees, and that kind of gets to my next bit about. Okay, so where do I come from? I found in the latter part of my military adventures that I was spending what time personally that I had more and more with plants. I was fortunate to be in a couple of interesting places that tropical and then the desert and then so there were lots of interesting plants to learn about. But it became evident to me that this was actually keeping me sane. This is really important to get out there and talk with the plants and get your hands in the soil as best you can. And then the calming effect, I think everyone knows. You wouldn't be here if you didn't know this. So I'm talking to the choir, but when you walk out underneath a tree or in a wonderful glade, this is someone's backyard in Hampton. That is a water oak, the big tree. But you walk around it's a small little garden, and my bag is right at the gate right there. And you walk in there and you can feel your blood pressure go down. You just calm. All of a sudden you take a deep breath and the world is a better place. So, and it had to do with the plants, not just the shade. If that had been a roof, it'd be cooler, but it wouldn't have the same effect. So that's there. And then aha moment number two, regardless of whatever your religious beliefs may be, I think the commonality in so many realization of how important, that's not a good sense, the commonality in the appreciation for the world as it is and as it should be, is the fundamental importance of the plants. Without photosynthesis, there is no life. Everything eventually gets back to eating plants, and the plants get the energy from the sun. And that's the fundamental basis, the rock upon which all of this life revolves. So, you look at this and this, I don't know if anybody guesses on what that is. Anybody seen it? It's a tree leafing out, but which tree? That is a tulip poplar. It's very neat. The bud has a duckbill shape to it, and that duckbill turns into this little pod. Waving my hands is doing it. It turns into this little pod, and then that's a leaf in there that's going to curl out. And there's something miraculous in that, isn't it? Okay, so, and aha moment number 3 is, you know, moving away from just the concept of how important the plants are, is how important the big plants are, what they do for us. We now know so much more science about the bigger the tree, the more carbon it stores, the longer, the more water it stores, the more carbon dioxide it scrubs, more particulates it takes out of the air. So if you look at this picture, you can see there's 2 people in there, and those are both tree stewards. We were measuring this tree. It is a live oak on the Air Force Base. And it puts me personally in a scale that is much healthier. You know, I'm not nearly as important as that tree in this picture, you know, because I'm taking the picture, I'm not even in it, but it's, it lets us kind of sort our priorities maybe a little bit. And then the last bit is getting over the very human tendency to anthropomorphize the trees, to, I know folks that call trees her or him. And in some cases, that's right. There are male and female trees in some species, but they're not hers and hims. They are trees, and they have their own language. They work on their own concepts and their own structures and their own rules. And if we will endeavor to understand, try to learn their language instead of trying to translate, trying to take what we see and put human terms on it. So if we will learn to live, this is, if anybody's been following the discussions about the rhizosphere and the matter of the fungal interfaces between the roots of different trees, the notion that the scientific experiment, rather groundbreaking now in 2006, where Suzanne Simard demonstrated out in the northwest of Canada, that the Douglas firs and the birches would trade energy. When the one was going dormant, it would get energy from the other. And those 2 different kinds of trees were symbiotic and supporting each other. So, you know, that's not a, I'm not using human language, but if we try to understand what the trees are doing, then we learn a lot more. So anyway, now I get off the soapbox. All right. Okay, so the tree stewards in the state of Virginia got their start right here in Williamsburg. Sue Liddell and a number of other folks, I don't know if Sue's here, but in 1997, they formed a little group to try to figure out how they could get to learn more about trees and do something about trees. So they set up a training program in 1998, which got us started. And then they invited neighboring entities of master gardeners to join them. And over time that grew up to include, as you see there, Gloucester. I tend, for the sake of organization, I tend to run those all alphabetically. There's no priority one way or the other, but Gloucester, Hampton, Newport News, and then James City County, Williamsburg was in the middle, in York, Poquoson. Those are the 5 BCE offices. Now, of course, that means that we actually have 7 entities, because James City County, Williamsburg, and York and Poquoson, which share a BCE office. Anyway, and one of the main tasks for that umbrella organization was to coordinate training and have training programs. So there were training programs in 2001 and 4 and 9, 13, 15, 18, and 20. which is one of the reasons why we have so many tree stewards, we keep training them. But there's plenty to do. And then to coordinate, so we have a generally handshake among the agents and authorities concerned that our tree stewards can work on each other's projects as appropriate. So that picture of the big live oak on Langley Air Force Base was part of a, it was a Hampton project at the request of the environmental office on base to update their tree inventory in their in the non-forest areas, which came out to 4,500 trees, and was of great help to them in filing their required TMDL. There was a big deadline they had in 2018. And so they were able to substantially, fill out the tree part of that. And for us, it was fun. It was interesting. We learned a lot identifying what the different trees were. And we went basically once a month for several years. And my point though, is we had people from every one of our groups, of our VCE groups except Gloucester, come at different times. The two people in that picture, one is from York and one was from Newport News. And so it was a combined effort that we were able to help each other out and learn from each other. So, and then this led to VCE offering advanced, and this got into other advanced programs. So water stewards and land care stewards are the other two Master Gardener advanced programs. There are other master programs, but within the Master Gardeners, and those are taught in rotation, one every year at Master Gardener College. It's condensed. It's like 4 days where you pick up, enough classes to satisfy the advanced program, but then you have to go home and do your own project. And you have, and then you have this text down to look at, and hopefully you get it ahead of time, and then people take it home and study it. But at least it's there. So, all right. So what? Just all the tree stewards. This is an approximate list of things that tree stewards have done in the past. Tree calls and help desk expertise. So I don't know how many people know this, but Master Gardeners began as an extension of an agent's help desk workload. That was the origin of Master Gardeners. So that was our first ever mission, was to help the public with their questions. That's still a fundamental thing that we do. Presentations and classes, tree planting signs, so I'm not going to read all that. And I do know establishing arboretums, the tree stewards of James City County, Williamsburg have been really the leaders, have shown a lot of us the new tools there are to get arboreta established, registered, to use the ArtNet business, and a lot of us have learned a great deal about that. I don't think, none of the rest of us have as yet managed to snag a real arboretum, but I predict we will follow the lead there. All right. Okay, and there is Sue Liddell, and forgive me because I didn't have a note, but the lady next to her, this is some time past, but farmers markets are still farmers markets. And on the right is a tree steward and a homeowner trying to figure out what's, the homeowner has some concern. I was there, I took the picture, I don't really remember what was wrong. I think it's a little thin and he's worried about maybe it's dying. Oh my gosh. So we were able to reassure him this. Talk about not fertilizing his lawn right around the tree, a few other things. So, anyway. tree inventories on the left. That is that's a project from the intern class of, and you're in the picture. What year was that? Yeah, exactly. I know, that's that. And then, that's right. And Gene Millen, and then, yeah, this was, don't remember the name, it's down up over by, the 4-H center. Big old mansion and grounds that had been, let lie for too long. And, county was trying to figure out what to do with it. The one on the right is an inventory that I was part of, that was actually part of my intern project in 2009. So that's one of the 3 hills in here. I mean, that's all we got. I think this floor here slopes more than Hampton Hills. Okay. All right. So the discussion of training and training programs then leads to what about the training manual? How did this come about? The training resources consisted of a whole lot of articles that were run off and stuffed into a binder in an approximate order. That was at the state level. If you took the state course, that's what you got. If you took our course, it depended every year. We did the best we could to find some kind of resource. Our horticulture text that we used for a number of years was really good as college text for arborists, but it didn't have a whole lot of botany in it because they figured biology and botany was already covered by the other courses that the arborists were taking. So it was frankly a little more advanced than we needed in some ways and not enough in others. And it was a college textbook, and you know that means expensive. And then it was getting old. We tried the urban, Up from the Roots, Urban Tree Planners book, excellent book. But very much meant for engineers in city landscape design, which again, didn't quite what we needed. And then we would run off articles that we could find to supplement, which was very time consuming and frustrating and left a lot of holes. And so we said, as our action after the 2015 class, we said, we need to try to design. There isn't anybody else in the state that's, there are only a couple of other large concentrations of tree stewards, Virginia Beach and Southside, Virginia Beach and Norfolk, and the other entities there have a bit of a concentration, although no umbrella organization. And just lately, in the last 3-4 years, Loudoun County is building a small entity of tree stewards. But there isn't any group that was better situated than ours to try to accomplish that, to come up with a text that was meant for us. There is a text from the Virginia Department of Forestry for the tree stewards that are organized by different cities, and they have nothing to do with the master gardeners. Some of those groups have been around a long time. The ones in Charlottesville are particularly noteworthy and do very worthy things, all kinds of different things. But that is an outreach of Department of Forestry in the first place, and they don't have an educational mission that we do necessarily. Some do, some don't. A lot of them are just taking care of trees. That's what they want to do. So they take people in basically off the street and give them a minimum. And we already there with Master Gardeners. So we have to go on beyond that. So on beyond your basic Master Gardener handbook. There's a view of one of the training courses from the people in it. That's Dr. Steward Ware in the back corner with bald head, teaching us about dichotomous keys on winter trees. So we needed something to support that. Okay. The goals, as I said, we assume first off that everybody knows what's in the basic handbook. Then we want to train in specific areas that are hard to find at anything below a college level, and that's the tree function and structure. I was talking about trying to learn the language of the trees. If you can think yourself as if you're a little molecule running up and down the vascular system of the tree, then you can kind of try to understand. It will help you understand when the problem is in the roots, when the problem is up here, at the top of the tree. You can explain in fairly easy terms to people why not to girdle the trunk. Okay, if you explain it in terms of, there's the waters and the minerals come up the roots in one set of tubes, and then the sugars, the carbohydrates that come from the photosynthesis or are stored in the roots in the winter, they move up and down the other set of tubes, and they're right under the bark. And so if you stop that movement, then the food and the water can't get from where they are to where they need to be, and the tree starves, strangles. Just takes 2 minutes, and I have yet to see a homeowner who doesn't get it, if you explain it that way. Yeah, so then additional chapters, biotic and abiotic challenges. Some of these things, a lot of it is stuff that, so the basic ones, you know what the likely suspects are, but you also know that there's a whole lot more that no one person can carry in their head. So the education part is to give people someplace to go look to start with at likely choices or key probabilities, and then how to go find more help if that's not enough. That also includes not just pests like insects and fungi and so forth, but also, which is getting back to understanding how the trees go, the effect of wind and storm, and why it's important to do proper pruning so that it reduces the potential for damage. Why you take care of the soil so that it lets the roots be anchored, and how to tell if that anchoring is sufficient or not, or maybe needs to be helped. And that's where I get down to first level help to tree owners. We don't pretend to be arborists. We very clearly say we are not arborists, but we are trained to be able to tell people when they need professional help. And then they'll either, sometimes you can pretty well dispose of it. You can say, yep, that, you just hurt that tree with your weed eater. That you don't need to be a professional arborist to say that. Or you planted it too deep. Patsy McCready had a wonderful picture she shared with a bunch of us of I don't know how old this tree was, but it had been in the ground there, they knew, for 20 years. It was planted roughly 10 inches too deep, and it had girdled itself, the bark in the soil had rotted, and now all of a sudden, my tree's dying. What happened? What happened was 20 years ago. But again, you don't need an arborist to tell somebody that. Okay, so that gets through that one. There's the committee. You'll know there's people from Gloucester. We had two from Virginia Beach, which were very helpful. Sherry Kern, many of you I think have heard her speak. She is a master gardener and tree steward from Virginia Beach, but she's also a horticultural professional. She was a teacher at Tidewater Community College for years. And we had the agent we put out a call to see if anybody wanted to help us from anywhere else. And Ed Olson, who's the agent in Henrico, volunteered to come and work on the siting and planting part. So anyway, that's the group. Different people wrote different things. Some people mainly just did the research or help with the ideas. So this was the, I think I ran this over, but that's the purpose. So before we write the manual, make sure we understand what tree stewards are doing or meant to be doing, what training do they need to do that, and then what resources were available. And that got to the resources available was not much. Key steps. I think I've covered most of this already. I'll go down to the bottom bullet here, assign chapters. So initially we had this thought that we could go out there and gather resources, and they were out there and we just had to put them together. And one of our folks did a search of all the states in the country to see if what anybody had as far as tree steward training programs and materials that we could use. Very, very little. There's been growth since then. There are a few programs, some of them designed for the general public as, you know, but at least they're there. But Patsy McGrady stepped up to do the tree families. This is one of the concepts we want people to understand trees. It really, it helps to understand the families they're in. So, for example, we all know emerald ash borer and the ash trees, but you know, fringe trees are a concern to watch. And you say, why is that? Why is that? Because ash trees and fringe trees are in the family of the olives. And so there is something about their biology that attracts that emerald ash borer. Let's see, for fire blight. Fire blight tends to afflict things in the apple. Okay. Apples and pyrus, apples and pears. So we all know Bradford pears, get that? Right, absolutely. We had a service pear. That all gets back into the rose family, actually. So service pear died of fire blight. Makes sense? And then as far as how they grow and what they like, and in terms of identification, it definitely helps. The legume family has some very, very particular characteristics that can help you. If you see one, you can usually tell it's in that family, and that eliminates a lot of other things. So, anyway, I'm running on. Patsy McGrady, as I said, volunteered to deal with taxonomy in trying to turn that into English so you could understand it. And she did a wonderful job in about 5 pages. And then we, as a committee, we kind of selected what we thought were the most significant tree families to cover in something under 25 or 30 pages. And she assembled all that and showed us, you know, everybody else, that we actually could write this ourselves with a lot of trepidation. What are we thinking? But we could actually write this, that we didn't have to go find somebody else's work. In one case, Carol Fryer had the very good sense to realize that in one case, and that is pruning, the expert and the work really were, they were out there. So, and she identified that Dr. Ed Gilman of the University of Florida had it covered and arranged for us to use his work. So, so you know, we weren't stuck on writing it ourselves. In fact, it was lovely that we didn't have to try to write the pruning. But where we had to write it, we settled down and we did. So, all right. So, testing and refining, here's the processes. So once we got it basically assembled by the middle of 2017, Then we had a beta test in the 2018 class, and that, having been a veteran of training committees for tree stewards from 2011 onward, it was wonderful to have a text with a curriculum that was laid out so that we could follow it. We didn't necessarily have, you speakers, you can't necessarily follow in exact order, but to get everything, it was concrete subject. Today's subject is this chapter. And the students could follow along in the book, they could read ahead of time. We didn't have to try to figure out how do we cover this because we don't have any document for it. We didn't have to do that. We didn't. So then the final draft in 2019, well, so it sat there for a while. And then later on in 2020, the Master Gardener Coordinator's Office found some funds, got an intern to work with us and turn it into a Pressbooks document. And this was a first venture for VCE to actually do an open publication with the library. It's a precedent to have a document that an educational document through the library that's published. You can see on the bottom line, actual ISBN number. That's I just checked it yesterday, that URL right there. You can download that address. You can do it now if you want. You can look it up. It's free. It can be obtained as a PDF if you want to print it. Or it's got some nice interactive features whereby instead of having to look up the footnote at the end of the chapter, the interactive form of it, you just do this little hyperlink, you hover over you hover over something and then it shows you what that footnote was, which is kind of cool. So that's that. All right, summary, writing the Tree Steward Manual. It was an adventure in research. Gwen Harris of York, who did the soils chapter, my goodness, is she's a bear on research. She turned up a whole new thought process, a piece of information that there are orders of soils. Within taxonomy, and taxonomy doesn't necessarily just apply to plants, it's insects but there's taxonomy of soils. So in trees, it's families that are important. In insects, think back to your Master Gardener handbook. It's insects, it's the orders, which is above the families. That are of key points. There's 6 orders of insects. So it's just 6. Somebody refresh my memory. And that opened up some understanding of, for example, longleaf pines grow best in a very specific soil that looks rather like dirty sugar. It has very, very little minerals in it, and it drains like crazy. But that's what they like. And that is a whole different soil order. So where you find that soil is, that tells you why you're probably not going to grow corn in something like that. And why the longleaf pines, they will grow in other soils, obviously. We do have them growing around here, but that's where they grow best, where they grow naturally. Understanding. Okay, affirmation of what volunteers can do. In 2015, I don't think any of us had any idea that we were going to actually write this book. But we did. And the reason was to get out more and better tree knowledge. to make it more accessible to people. And then the goal, as always, that's what we're doing here as Master Gardeners, public education. Which describes Tree Street, right? Yes, anyway. And there's my last slide. So, and again, research. Patsy McCready turned up that quote to hit her chapter. So anyway, that's all I got. Any questions?
Carol, that was wonderful. One first question that I'm sure someone's going to ask is, when are you going to offer the next tree story class?
Well, we're actually, as of right now, the thinking is January through March of 2023. What we have done in the past is 1 3-hour session a week for 12 weeks. Doesn't have to be that way. It's been discussed that one could do 2 3 hours, like 6 hours once a week, and then it's only 6 weeks. But pros and cons to be discussed. People really like having, in-person speakers, but there's nothing necessarily magic about that. We do find one of the key parts of the training process, though, is getting students to go from just taking in knowledge to turning that knowledge around into a project. The requirement for the course, this is true for any advanced program for Master Gardeners, you have to turn in 20 hours of work on a project that you helped either design or modify, or something that you didn't just, go log in hours on somebody else's project, but you helped either revive an old project. You looked around and saw that the church you go to has no trees around the parking lot at all, and there's room for them. So that might be your project, to go see if you can't persuade people to get on a plan and then organize how you're going to fund the trees. It can be huge. It can be the group that said Colonial Williamsburg's tree map was 15 years old, more or less. Was maybe not quite mimeograph. I'm old enough to know what that means, but it was I'm not even sure it existed in electrons. It was just photocopies of a hand-drawn map, of an artist drawn map. And it obviously a bunch of the trees on it weren't there anymore, and others had been planted. And so this intrepid group said, well, why don't we update this? And lo and behold, by the time done, are you up to, what level are we going to? There you go. Are you going for 3?
We're working on 3.
There you go. That is a big, big deal. But that started as an intern project. So, yeah, and you don't, but to get people to thinking, to make the transition from just learning to doing. And a lot of times that takes folks finding who else they're compatible working with, who has similar interests, who has similar opportunities. So maybe that church, you need somebody else working with you, and somebody who maybe isn't a member of that church, but you all work together well. So you call in another tree steward intern. You work on it together. There is no visual of the speaker.
Yeah, we've got that fixed.
Oh, okay. All right. The pictures are much nicer. Okay, and you don't have to complete the project. It doesn't even have to be a success. If you learn something from it. Some of the best projects, ran smack into a wall, and then you learn that. So we've had two efforts at Fort Monroe tree tours in Hampton. And they've gotten, the second one got a little farther than the first one, but they both come up against, trying to coordinate the bureaucracy, bureaucratic interface between the Fort Monroe Authority and the Park Service. You really don't want to know any more about that right now. But we're not giving up, and I predict there'll be another project for long. Did I answer the question? Okay.
I think so.
All right. Question? I talked you all into the round. Yes, back there.
Carol, how do you keep the information in the manual up to date? Or is it just that the information is accurate to begin with, it's not going to change that much? It's not a concern.
The scientific information, what we wrote was at a macro enough level that I don't think it will change, and I don't think there's much in there that's wrong. I hope not. But what I see is, for instance, the growth, huge growth in the understanding of that rhizosphere discussion and what's going on between the roots of the trees. That's going to keep on growing. And so at some point we will, another rewrite or a rewrite will then wind up maybe adding more material. Well, I'll give you one though, between the final draft that we turned in and the real publication, when we got back to it, there was a little online group, Frank Riley, anybody knows him? Yeah, everybody knows Frank Riley, yes. Frank Riley and Dave Close and Devin Jones and a couple other people were in on suggestions for, as we got ready for preparing it for the final, which was more complicated than I thought it would be, but it came out. But what they said, particularly Frank, was let's put in climate change. In 2015, there was still a lot of fence in parts of the scientific world, even though it was pretty obvious. But we didn't explicitly talk about climate change and the effects upon our trees and the tree cover. So this was an official request to go back in there, and we added a bunch to the ecology chapter. I did a bunch of research on how the forest biomes, the big entities, if you look at the United States or the world, what the main types of trees are in different parts of the country and how that is changing. And also research into how important it is to have trees with deeper roots so that they will survive the changing conditions. And the shift, we're going to be seeing a shift in places where you need trees that are more resilient to extremes, either of heat, drought, something like that, and also trees that are able to soak up water. And in Hampton, this is a big deal. Trees that soak up water is a big deal. So that was in a matter of 2 years. I foresee, I don't know what the next direction will be, but we will probably see more of that kind of concern the next week, right? Question? Nope. Oh, yeah.
Why do you think that you had to work so hard to create a book when it's so important?
Why do I think we had to work so hard?
Tree story book, when obviously this is so important. Why was there such a lack of information?
I don't think anybody had there wasn't anybody in the right place with the energy to spare. So there is a water steward manual because there were a couple of people who were willing to work on that. But the right place, the right time. The need was there. There's enough interest in tree stewards. In the trees, it's becoming ever more obvious how important they are. So I think right place, right time, and the right people. One minute.
Is there a place where you list the projects that the tree stewards have done? In case we want to go like, look at what has been researched or accomplished or learned?
Yeah, I have, as a coordinator, I'm kind of a repository of a bunch of records and, yes, so, and Cherie did a good job as her intern project of organizing part of that. And then I've been collecting them since. So there is a spreadsheet. I've got to get back and update it for the last year or so. Of the projects that are briefed and discussed at our quarterly tree steward meetings, peninsula tree steward meetings. Rick Brown there is your lead tree steward in James City County, Williamsburg. And he's been very good at pushing me to assemble all that in one document. And as we get closer to and get into the next tree steward class, we will have that. So, yeah. Anybody else? Okay.
Let's check on the chat. Yes.
Is the tree steward manual available online? Yes, it is. And the link was there, and it's actually, you don't even need to remember the link. You just type VCE Master Gardener Tree Steward Manual, and there it is.
All you need to do is, I did it when we were here, just put tree steward manual, it's short.
Yeah, and I mean, if it gives you something else, you just add VCE and Master Gardener if you need to. Okay, same here. When is the next scheduled? Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing some of you in January. And to everybody else, remember, you don't have to be a tree steward to care about trees. Yes.
Where is the next class to be held?
What we have done in the past is we have had a couple of different locations and moved from one to the other. So typically it's ranged from Freedom Park. There's a recreational center building on the Williamsburg Yorktown Road in Lackey. That's a pretty nice central position. I imagine we'll have a lot of classes there. Sandy Bottom Nature Park in Hampton. We've met at a couple other places. We tend to try to find something in the middle, because if you think all the way on the far side of Hampton, we have two of our people that live on Grandview Island, if you know what that is. A long way to get from Grandview Island to the Charles City County line or to Freedom Park. Or Tawana or wherever. That's a long, or the upper end of Gloucester, because we have one guy who lives almost to Urbana in Gloucester. So it's a big spread. I don't think it could be bigger, honestly. But that way, if we make it so that, everyone gets about an even commute, and then we consider where our speakers are coming from. So if they're coming from Richmond area, we'll try to meet on the north end. If they're coming from Virginia Beach, we'll meet on the south end. Anyway, that was way more answer than was necessary. Yes, it moves around a little with as much consideration for where people are coming from and sharing the commutes. And then there's also the possibility of some online, although I really think we need the sharing time for discussion. One of the things that we've done in the classes is to review past projects, have the people who did interesting past projects of different kinds come and spend 10 minutes talking about what that project was. And that's your opportunity if you spark something and say, oh, we could do something like that in where my neighborhood, the school I used to teach at, whatever. it sparks ideas. So anyway, more for that. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I think I give you back 5 minutes.
Carol,
Thank you so
thanks.
much.